Vadar awoke to the low hum of machinery and the sterile scent of recirculated air. His mind, sluggish from decades of induced slumber, sharpened incrementally with each passing second. He opened his eyes to the soft glow of the stasis pod's internal lights, blinking rapidly to clear the residue of hypersleep. The lid of the pod retracted with a smooth mechanical hiss, revealing the interior of the warship's revival chamber. Though Vadar was no stranger to galactic travel, each awakening always felt surreal, like stepping from a dream into a universe that had aged while he remained frozen in time. He shivered slightly, his physiology still recalibrating. Even after centuries of biomedical innovation, emerging from hypersleep left a lingering ache in every cell. He sat up, catching a distorted reflection of himself in the glossy surface of a nearby equipment console. His skin, greenish and faintly luminescent under the chamber's lights, looked slightly wrinkled around the edges of his cheeks, as if the cryogenic freeze had not perfectly preserved him. His twin antennae twitched, tasting the atmosphere for any anomalies. At least they had not lost structural elasticity. He flexed his fingers and toes, letting the returning sensation drift through him in pins and needles. He had survived another long voyage. He glanced around to see the rest of the revival units lined up in neat rows. The warship he occupied was one among hundreds, possibly thousands, in a massive fleet that the Galactic War Council, often referred to simply as the Council, had dispatched to the edge of a spiral arm for a new mission. What that mission entailed, he only vaguely remembered from pre-launch briefings. Earth, a planet whose natives called themselves humans, had shown remarkable but puzzling technological growth. The Council had concluded that these humans were too fractured, too disorganized to be left to their own devices, especially with their rapid advancements in certain critical fields. Vadar had read intelligence packets about them, studying glimpses of Earth's thousands of nations, its myriad cultures, and an arsenal of destructive devices that far exceeded typical expectations for a species at their approximate developmental stage. Yet the Council believed, or more precisely had insisted, that humanity would pose no real threat once faced with the unity and might of the Armada. Vadar had never quite shared the same absolute confidence. He pulled himself from the hypersleep pod and felt the artificial gravity pulling at his limbs. With a shake of his head, he approached the next pod. The stasis field was already in the final stages of deactivation. He read the occupant's name on the digital panel, Reptar. Reptar belonged to a reptilian species known for robust muscular frames, tough scales, and a temperament that leaned toward aggression in times of conflict. His second eyelids flicked open the moment the lid of his pod slid back. With slow, powerful movements, Reptar rose. His scaled face twisted in a near scowl, though that was more a typical expression than a sign of annoyance. He caught Vadar's gaze, snorted, and stretched his thick arms behind his back. The stasis system beeped as it completed the process of cellular revitalization. Reptar's eyes, with vertical slits for pupils, widened as he took his first true breath in over a century. Vadar, Reptar rasped, voice still raw. How much longer until we see the planet? Vadar replied. We must first confirm that all primary council delegates are awake and operational. But yes, we should be in the Terran system by now. He glanced at the overhead monitor, which confirmed they had arrived. The star labeled Sol glimmered at the center of the system, and the warship was already deep inside its gravity well. Alongside them would be many ships from different species. The Kians, the Theri, the Makari, the Avian Kora, the Ferd Zella, and other allied races. The War Council was old and powerful, having subjugated or absorbed dozens of planets in the name of galactic stability. That phrase always sounded comforting in official speeches, though Vadar felt an undercurrent of violence behind it. Historically, the Council had used overwhelming force to bring any rebellious species into line. The idea was that unification under strict governance prevented destructive rivalries from spreading across star systems. If a species refused to unify on its own, the Council would unify by force. Reptar stepped from his pod, his scales reflecting the glowing overhead lights in flickers of greenish gold. He rubbed a clawed hand along the scales on his neck. "I always hate these sleeps," he grunted. "I can never get used to waking up in an entirely new era. 1 minute, the galaxy is as we knew it, and the next, everything might have changed." Vadar nodded. "We have a briefing in 2 hours. Let's see who else is awake." They moved to the next pod, which housed Sorgor, a Kian with crimson skin and horns sweeping back from his forehead. Sor was not just physically intimidating. He carried an aura of silent cunning. As the translucent lid of the pod slid open, Sor's eyes snapped open simultaneously, bright yellow irises glinting with a predatory focus. For a moment, his chest did not move. Then he inhaled slowly, the ridges on his neck pulsing with life. "Still in one piece, I see," Sor said in a voice incongruously smooth for such a fearsome appearance. His forked tongue flicked across rows of needle-like teeth. "Where are the others?" "We're the first to awaken," Vadar said. "Or at least among the first. The rest should be coming around any moment. We'll convene soon." He looked down at the small data device strapped to his waist, a standard council translator and field computer. It displayed a flurry of status updates as the other pods in the chamber completed their revival cycles. "We should prepare ourselves. We need to see how far Earth's development has progressed." Reptar looked displeased. "I doubt it will have progressed enough to make any difference. They were still crawling around that planet with their petty factions a century ago, just like the intel suggested. If anything, this mission should be straightforward." Sor tilted his head, horns glinting in the overhead light. "I do recall the last update indicated they were fractious, yes. But their development in areas like information technology was oddly advanced, out of proportion with their overall level. Our analysts found that interesting enough to merit a full expedition." Vadar said, "We'll get a complete briefing soon. Let's not jump to conclusions." But in truth, he couldn't deny the subtle sense of unease he felt. The council had arrived with a formidable force. He'd seen the formation patterns, read the manifests. Yet the analyses also hinted that humans were unpredictable. If they were so divided, it might have been beneficial to them had the council arrived centuries earlier. Now, with the speed of their progress, who knew what cunning weaponry they might have developed? They waited for the rest of the high-ranking delegates to awaken. Within 2 hours, the principal counselors convened in the vessel's primary briefing chamber, a circular room lined with holographic projection panels. Each species took a seat in a specialized chair designed for their shape and size. Zella, covered in thick black fur, rubbed her eyes wearily. Makari, whose compound eyes sparkled with refracted light, clicked mandibles in annoyance at the dryness of starship air. Cora, part of an aquatic race, remained in a special hover chair filled partially with nutrient solution to keep her hydrated. Altogether, 7 representatives formed the central authority on this mission, with Vadar, Reptar, and Sor among the most influential voices. The others had either specialized roles or lesser voting power. A massive holographic display came to life in the center of the chamber, showing the planet Earth rotating on its axis. Thin lines of data and graphs shimmered around it, each representing different domains of human progress: economic, cultural, technological, military. The date stamps indicated that most of this data was gleaned from remote observation drones and leftover signals from Earth's digital networks. Vadar spoke first. "Counselors, we've arrived in Earth's orbit after our long journey. We're here because the simulations predict that if this species continues on its current path, it will fragment across multiple star systems once it masters interplanetary travel. This, the Council has deemed, would be disastrous for galactic stability." Cora made a bubbling sound that the translator rendered as a soft, feminine voice. "Indeed, but might we not attempt guidance first? Let them unify in a natural manner." Reptar leaned forward, his scaled hand tapping the table. "They've had centuries to unify. They seem incapable of it. Our intelligence states they remain divided into nearly 200 nations. They quarrel among themselves constantly. Some of them, particularly the largest powers, possess enough armaments to destroy their own planet many times over. They call these nuclear weapons, if I recall. A savage concept. Zella, her fur rippling with agitation, interjected, "It isn't just nuclear weapons. Our more recent scans indicate they've experimented with advanced concepts of energy manipulation. A few theoretical papers even mention antimatter storage. That's well beyond what a fraction planet should be capable of sustaining. It's contradictory to see them bicker over territory and also invest in technologies that could wipe out the entire species." Vadar sighed, which is exactly why the Council passed a resolution to intervene. "We face three choices: integrate them peacefully, quarantine them, or, if neither is viable, impose forced unification by military means." That last option was widely considered the only safe approach, given the unpredictability of a species that invests heavily in destructive capacities. "Still, we'll give them a final chance to surrender or accept our terms of membership." Sora's eyes glowed a faint yellow as he studied the hologram. Membership they won't accept. Their records suggest they refuse to cede sovereignty to any single global authority. You know how they function. Powerful nation-states forming alliances, dissolving them, forging new ones. It's chaos incarnate from the perspective of the Council. Zella let out a thoughtful rumble. "We also discovered they've made only marginal progress in permanent off-world colonies. A small presence on their moon, a research outpost, or two on Mars. Hardly real expansions. They still rely on chemical rockets for the most part. They've advanced in leaps and bounds in certain technologies, but stagnate in others." Contradictions, Reptar growled. "That is their hallmark." He cast a sidelong glance at Vadar. "So what is our plan, exactly?" Vadar manipulated the holographic interface, enlarging the image of Earth. "We proceed with standard war council protocol. We appear in force. We broadcast a declaration that their fragmentation is no longer permissible. We demand unconditional unity under the council banner. If they refuse, we demonstrate power. If that fails, we take further action. The idea is that any rational species, faced with certain annihilation, would unify or surrender. Historically, it's worked with species that had no real means of resisting an armada this large." Sora let out a quiet hiss of amusement. "We'll see if humans behave rationally." The counselors concluded the briefing with a unanimous vote to deliver the ultimatum. Within a short span, the entire fleet moved into position around the planet. From the warship's main observation deck, Vadar could see the curvature of Earth behind layers of atmosphere. Clouds drifted in swirling patterns over blue oceans and green-brown landmasses. On the tactical display, nearly 1,000 war council vessels were arranged in a massive orbital formation, from sleek scout ships to colossal dreadnoughts armed with enough firepower to char continents. Vadar felt a pang in his chest. Part of him hoped the humans would do the sensible thing and capitulate, thus avoiding massive bloodshed. Another part worried that a species who lived on the brink of self-destruction might not respond in the typical way. He oversaw the first phase of the plan, transmitting a direct message to the planet. The Council demanded a global response, instructing whichever authorities existed to present themselves. As expected, the message was broadcast on all major frequencies. They waited. Earth, for a time, seemed silent and stunned. Then multiple transmissions erupted, each from different nations, different languages, and different vantage points. Over the next few hours, the Council's translation systems were flooded with human messages, official statements, contradictory demands, panicked news reports, even impassioned pleas for calm. Clearly, there was no single planetary leader to speak for them. Reptar smirked. "They can't even agree on who should negotiate with us." Zella frowned. "It's exactly as the simulations predicted. They're not prepared for a unified front." She paused, rechecking the readings. "Strange. Their orbital sensors must be picking up the presence of our fleet by now. They're mobilizing a lot of ground-based installations. I see an influx of signals. Some appear to be coordinating weapons arrays." Reptar gave a dismissive snort. "Primitive ballistic missiles, no doubt. Let them try." They'll see soon enough that such crude devices cannot penetrate our shielding. Vadar noticed that Sora observed the sensor feed with narrowed eyes. There are a lot of them, Sora said quietly. More than I'd expect from a fractured planet. He tilted his head. And they're not just from one or two nations. Data suggests dozens of nations are coordinating in some manner. Is that even feasible if they're as divided as we think? A twinge of unease resurfaced in Vadar. He recalled reading about something humans called MAD, mutually assured destruction, an archaic doctrine from their history. It posited that if each side possessed the power to annihilate the other, neither would dare strike first. That had, apparently, kept them from nuclear war among themselves for a significant portion of modern history. But would that same assured destruction logic unite them against an extraterrestrial threat? The Council began the second phase. They broadcast a narrower message, more threatening in tone, instructing the largest nation-states to respond immediately or face a demonstration of might. Vadar tried to remain clinical, though a small part of him cringed at the casual arrogance with which the Council threatened entire populations. He was loyal to the Council's principles, yet something about this mission felt off. Minutes later, the War Council dreadnoughts powered their forward cannons, firing a series of low-yield energy beams at certain uninhabited sites on Earth's surface as a warning shot. Massive plumes of debris kicked up from desert regions, remote enough to avoid civilian casualties, but close enough to major bases that the threat was clear. The strike created an eerie hush in the Council's command channels. Usually, a display like that was enough to force lesser-developed civilizations to their knees. Then an urgent alarm flared across the sensor grid. Sora was the first to respond. We have multiple launches detected. Hundreds. No, thousands. His voice grew tense. They're saturating our orbit with ballistic missiles. Reptar squinted. Insane. Why so many? They think volume can break our line. Zella's fur bristled. Wait, the sensors are reading unusual energy patterns in some of these warheads. Fission, fusion signatures, and something else. Antimatter, Cora gasped, her watery eyes going wide. That's not possible. They couldn't have perfected large-scale antimatter warheads if they're stuck with chemical rockets for space travel. But there was no time to debate. Dozens of brilliant flashes popped on the main tactical display. The first Council destroyer, Helix 7, vanished from the screen. It was gone so quickly that at first Vadar thought it must have been a sensor glitch. But then more vanished, too many to be a coincidence. A stunned hush fell over the entire chamber. They've destroyed our destroyers, Reptar said, staring in disbelief. Those ballistic missiles are carrying yields far beyond standard nuclear. The shields are collapsing under the intensity. Sora's fanged mouth twisted in alarm. They must have developed advanced warheads purely for deterrence among themselves. But now they've turned them on us. Panic rippled through the War Council's formation as more missiles rose from Earth's surface. The humans launched them from silos scattered around multiple continents, from submarines hidden in oceans, from mobile platforms that had rolled into position. Vadar watched in horror as unstoppable waves of destructive energy battered the Council's ships. Some tried to maneuver. Others tried to raise maximum shields. But the sheer volume and destructive yield overwhelmed defensive measures that had never been tested against so many high-yield warheads at once. Evade, someone shouted over the comm. But evasion was nearly impossible in such close orbital formation. Helplessly, Vadar witnessed tens of thousands of smaller projectiles streaking upward. Not all carried the same destructive power, but enough of them did. Every few seconds, a Council capital ship winked out of existence in a blinding sphere of plasma and shards. Some craft managed partial evasive maneuvers, yet the storm of warheads hammered them relentlessly. This is madness, Reptar roared, smashing a clawed fist onto the control console. How can a planet so divided deploy such a coordinated strike? Zella's eyes flicked across the sensor readouts. They're linking data across multiple nations, multiple satellites, some system of integrated command. A frantic voice from the fleet's AI interface reported casualty figures. Hundreds of council ships lost, half the fleet compromised in under an hour. Vadar felt his stomach churn as the scope of the catastrophe became clear. All illusions of an easy victory disintegrated in that savage assault. For the first time, the War Council had found an enemy who possessed unstoppable destructive power, developed not for interstellar conquest, but for deterrence against themselves. Now that an external threat loomed overhead, those weapons turned outward in a terrifying show of unity. The War Council signaled a full retreat to the far side of Earth's moon, hoping to buy time to regroup. Surviving ships limped away from the immediate kill zone. Debris clouded orbital space. The entire offensive had collapsed almost as quickly as it began. And then, as if to twist the blade of irony, Earth's message came through. Multiple heads of state, some speaking in languages unknown to the Council system, were patched together into a single broadcast that the translation suite laboriously stitched into one comprehensible statement. Their words were tense, but strangely polite, as though they themselves were unsure if they had done the right thing. "Attention, unidentified fleet," said a man in a formal suit with a small flag pin on his lapel. "We believed you intended to exterminate us. Our intelligence indicated your warships opened fire on our territory. We responded with what we hoped would be a deterrent to protect our planet. If there's been a misunderstanding, we regret the loss of life on both sides. However, we will not hesitate to defend ourselves further. Please clarify your intentions." Silence gripped the War Council's command chamber. No one had expected a species so fractured to speak collectively, let alone unify instantly against a common threat. They had also not expected humans to be so polite in the aftermath of such a devastating display. Soar's lips peeled back in an uneasy snarl, but he had no immediate retort. Reptar seethed, quietly fuming that their unstoppable armada had been thoroughly routed. Vadar inhaled and stepped forward. "This is Overseer Vadar of the Galactic War Council," he began, speaking into the comm channel. His translator broadcast in multiple Earth languages. "Our initial approach was, indeed, an attempt to force your unification. We believe your planet was a danger to itself and to the rest of the galaxy. We have clearly underestimated your defensive capabilities. We do not desire further bloodshed." The screen showed multiple human officials reacting. Some looked confused, some angry. One older woman in a dark business suit spoke with calm deliberation. "So, your council intended to unify humanity by threat of annihilation?" "Yes," Vadar said, feeling an unfamiliar sense of shame gnaw at him. "That is our standard approach to civilizations that remain divided. Historically, they are prone to spreading conflict beyond their home systems once they attain faster-than-light technology. The Council's mandate is to maintain order. We do so by requiring a single, stable planetary government before a species can join interstellar society. We saw no evidence your planet was close to that. We believed you would either surrender or unify under force." A tall man with a grim expression replied, "We have indeed spent centuries divided, but we have also developed extensive frameworks for cooperation. None of us want to see Earth destroyed, so we united for this emergency. You left us no choice. We have a stockpile of weapons intended to deter each other, ironically enough. Today, we've put them to use collectively." Zella murmured in Vadar's ear, "They're telling the truth. Our cultural analysis did note a phenomenon they called mutually assured destruction, but we assumed they would never coordinate it so effectively." Reptar's voice rose in frustration. "We lost half our fleet. Are we truly going to stand down now?" "We have no choice," Soar said grimly. "Another wave of missiles with antimatter warheads would annihilate the rest of us. The War Council seldom faces an enemy that can so effectively strike us in orbit. But we found one now." Vadar forced himself to remain steady. "Humans," he said into the open channel, "your power is formidable. We acknowledge your right to defend yourselves. We request a pause in hostilities so we may reconsider our approach." He braced for an arrogant demand from the humans, something along the lines of unconditional surrender by the council. Instead, the same older woman responded, "Agreed. But do not misinterpret our willingness to talk as weakness. Stay at a safe distance from Earth, or we will respond again." With that, the transmission ended. In the hush that followed, the council delegates exchanged baffled glances. Usually, after delivering a crippling blow, a victorious side would make demands. Yet these humans had simply demanded they keep away or keep talking. Zella broke the stunned silence. This species doesn't behave like any of the others we've encountered. They're fractious, yet they can unify under extreme threat. They have unimaginable destructive capabilities, yet they're not launching another wave at us immediately. They're a paradox, Sir observed, and that is exactly what makes them dangerous. The council reconvened, or what was left of it, in the battered command ship's central briefing chamber. Many vessels were gone, many delegates presumably lost. Only the 7 principal delegates remained, plus a handful of aides who had survived. The atmosphere was grim. The swirling hologram of Earth hovered at the center again, but this time its significance felt different. They were no longer poised to conquer the planet. They were forced to negotiate on humiliatingly equal terms, if not worse. Reptor's voice trembled with rage. "We can't just give up. The Council has never retreated from a planet without imposing order. The entire galaxy will question our authority." Zella responded quietly. "We have no fleet left to impose anything. A single volley from them can devastate what remains of our warships. If we attempt a final, desperate attack, we'll be destroyed for certain. We've seen their capabilities." Cora, drifting in her chair of nutrient solution, sounded pained. "Even if we inflicted destruction upon them, the cost would be unthinkable. There's no honor in mutual annihilation. We should accept that our standard approach has failed." Sir clasped his hands behind his back, his horns angled sharply. "We must adapt. Perhaps there is room for a diplomatic resolution. Our aim was to prevent them from fracturing across the galaxy. But they've shown us their brand of solidarity, however bizarre it might seem to us." They turned to Vadar, waiting for his perspective. He took a measured breath. "We came here assuming they would beg for mercy. Instead, we are the ones at their mercy. Yet they're willing to talk, at least for the moment. Let's see if there's a path forward that acknowledges their unique structure. Perhaps we can create an agreement that requires them to coordinate externally, without forcing them into a single planetary government." Reptar spat. "That goes against the Council's fundamental principle that any species must unify under one banner." Zella looked at him pointedly. "Better to adapt that principle than to die for it. No? The Council has changed policies before. This may be an exception we must accept." In the hours that followed, the Council delegates broadcast cautious messages toward Earth, proposing a remote conference. To their surprise, humanity responded swiftly. Despite lacking a single planetary government, they had apparently formed a specialized global crisis council that included major powers, representatives from dozens of regions, and even corporate entities that had a stake in off-world installations. The sheer variety of faces, languages, and backgrounds in the video feed would have been dizzying for any ordinary species. The council delegates watched as humans, so different from one another, spoke with surprising unity on how best to engage these alien invaders. A man with a refined accent explained the current stance of Earth's consortium. "We do not wish to escalate further. Your arrival was perceived as a mortal threat, and so we acted. Now that you have signaled a desire to negotiate, we are willing to discuss terms. But let us be absolutely clear. Earth will never accept a single global government by external imposition. Our nations have too many distinct cultures, traditions, and political systems. We do, however, have collaborative structures. We've proven that collaboration can be swift and deadly if threatened." Sor raised an eyebrow at that subtle threat woven into the statement. Reptar fumed quietly, but said nothing. Vadar leaned closer to the comm system. "We do not dispute your right to self-determination. Our council's sole intention was to ensure that when you leave your planet to colonize space, you do so as a unified front rather than hundreds of feuding factions. In the past, fractured species have unleashed chaos across multiple star systems. The tall man frowned. Then perhaps we can demonstrate a method to you. Humans have fought countless wars among ourselves. Yet we also formed international bodies to handle crises, from pandemics to asteroid threats. Our current crisis body is an extension of that tradition. We do not see fragmentation and cooperation as mutually exclusive. One of the other human delegates, wearing an official uniform, nodded. If your fear is that we'll spread our conflicts into space, perhaps we can negotiate an interplanetary protocol. We're willing to create binding agreements that ensure no rogue factions colonize recklessly or threaten others beyond Earth. Zella's ears perked up. That might be acceptable, but the War Council historically requires comprehensive governance. We will need some form of guarantee that your coordination is permanent, not ephemeral. The humans exchanged glances among themselves. We can craft treaties that are globally recognized, one said. We already do that here for matters like the usage of Antarctica or orbital space. Even the concept of nuclear nonproliferation was, for a time, a widely held agreement. Although it was not perfect, it kept us from obliterating ourselves. Now, faced with an external threat, we find new unity. That capacity for uniting in crisis is embedded in our species as much as our capacity for conflict. Vadar noticed the sincerity in those words and a renewed sense of confusion. Part of him was relieved that it might be possible to salvage a peaceful solution. Another part was awed by the pragmatic approach humans had. They had united quickly to repel the Council's invasion, yet they did not gloat or demand vengeance. It was as if they accepted war as a last resort, but were fully prepared to wage it if necessary. Over the next day and night, though night in space was a notional concept, the Council hammered out potential frameworks with these human representatives. Vadar's vessel drifted at the edge of Earth's gravitational influence, far enough to avoid accidental skirmishes. The battered War Council fleet hovered behind them. Constant repairs took place as technicians tried to salvage the remains of advanced vessels. Meanwhile, Earth displayed no further signs of launching additional missiles, although the Council scanners picked up that many were still armed and aimed upward, ready to strike if the aliens made another aggressive move. Between discussion sessions, Vadar roamed the warship's corridors, gazing out large observation windows at the distant glow of Earth. Had it not unleashed a torrent of deadly weapons, it would appear so peaceful, blue with swirling white clouds. He paused in a dark corridor, remembering how certain he and his fellow delegates had been that morning, sure that humanity would bow. Now, how the roles had reversed. The embarrassment he felt was overshadowed by a strange respect. Reptar approached, his clawed footsteps echoing on the metal floor. Still taking in the view? Trying to understand, Vadar said softly. They're not like any species we've dealt with before. The Council always insisted a single government was essential, that further fracturing would inevitably lead to widespread war. But these humans have found a precarious balance, where they keep each other in check with threats of mutual destruction. Then, at a moment's notice, they unify against an external foe. Reptar's scales rustled as he exhaled heavily. It's contradictory, that's true. Part of me hates that they've undone us. Another part respects it. For centuries, we believed that fracturing was the worst fate a species could face. Maybe humans have discovered a different path. They stood side by side, silent, until a summons arrived for the next negotiation round. This time, a direct link was established between the War Council's main delegates and Earth Crisis Council. The call opened on a wide shot showing various human officials from different cultures, and the translator automatically matched each face with a national insignia. Vadar thought it was curious that an entire planet's diversity could be summarized by small colored flags, each representing millions or even billions of individuals. An older man with silver hair cleared his throat and began to speak. We've prepared a draft for what we propose as an interplanetary accord. This document sets out terms that, if we expand beyond Earth, we do so under certain unifying principles, including non-aggression towards other species and no interference in Council territory without express permission. In exchange, we demand the Council respect our sovereignty here, including the right of separate nations to exist. Sor and Reptar both stiffened, but Vadar was the designated spokesperson. We will consider this carefully, Vadar said. It deviates from standard War Council doctrine, but you have demonstrated that your planet is unique. It doesn't have to be unique, a human woman interjected. We simply have no single government. We believe that is our strength. Perhaps you could learn from it, too. A hush fell on the Council's side. No species had ever dared suggest the War Council learn from them. But Vadar found the notion intriguing, albeit unsettling. We shall see, he said politely. The transmissions ended. A fragile ceasefire held. Both sides began drafting and revising the agreement. Through that process, more details about human civilization emerged. The Council had known the broad strokes, the wars, the alliances, the technologies. Yet hearing the humans explain it themselves was enlightening. Over centuries, they had nearly come to nuclear blows multiple times. But each time, they had pulled back, forging new frameworks of cooperation. The humans possessed a curious mix of hope and dread, progress and regression. They were, indeed, contradictory. As the second day of negotiations ended, Reptar called Vadar to the command deck. You might want to see this. On the main screen, multiple figures from Earth Crisis Council were patching through a final proposal for the Interplanetary Accord. Each major power had signed, and more were expected to ratify. In effect, it provided the Council a guarantee. Earth recognized the Council's broader authority in the galaxy, but Earth itself would remain a coalition of sovereign states, cooperating for space exploration. They would refrain from launching out into the galaxy as warring factions, offering a structured approach to colonization if and when they advanced to that stage. Vadar read over it, heart-pounding. It was a radical compromise. For centuries, the War Council had demanded total planetary unification. Yet the humans had refused to budge on that point, offering instead their mosaic of states that, ironically, had just inflicted the most humiliating defeat the Council had suffered in living memory. With the wreckage of Council ships orbiting Earth as a stark reminder, it was clear there would be no easy second attempt at conquest. He looked at Reptar, Sor, and the others. They exchanged heavy looks. Could the Council adapt? If they refused, the war would resume, and the Council would be annihilated. If they accepted, a new era might begin, one that recognized multiple internal governments as a valid arrangement for a spacefaring civilization. After all, what counted was how that civilization acted beyond its home planet. Sir broke the silence, his voice calmer than usual. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it seems. We have no choice if we want to live. If the War Council is to endure, we must adapt. He bared his teeth in a half-snarl that was more resignation than aggression. Reptar, fists clenched at his sides, slowly nodded. If I had known we'd face such a day, I might never have joined the Council's war wing. But it's better than total destruction, I suppose. Vadar let out a long breath. Let's present it to the Council's central authority, once we're able to re-establish contact with them. Reinforcements, if they ever arrive, might not be here for decades, and by then, the humans could have advanced even further. We have to conclude this ourselves. Let's finalize the accord. In a final transmission, the battered War Council delegates appeared on Earth screens. Vadar declared acceptance. The humans collectively breathed a sigh of relief, though some remained visibly cautious, uncertain if the Council might still betray them. But for now, both sides had found a stalemate that blossomed into a fragile peace. Days later, the Council's formation retreated to a safer orbital distance. The battered hulls of many warships were towed out of Earth's immediate orbit to reduce the risk of collision or accidental re-engagement. Drones from Earth soared up to collect debris that threatened to fall planetward. Both sides, oddly, cooperated in clearing the wreckage. It was a surreal sight to see Earth's comparatively primitive craft working in tandem with the Council's advanced salvage drones, all to prevent catastrophic damage from falling debris. In a final recorded broadcast, Earth's Crisis Council expressed a willingness to maintain open channels to the Council for cultural exchange and conflict resolution. In return, the War Council pledged not to deploy further fleets or forcibly unify Earth's governments. Vadar found himself surprising even his own colleagues by volunteering to remain as a liaison if the humans allowed it. Perhaps by living among them, he could unravel the mystery of how such fractured entities could unite so fiercely when threatened. But that was a discussion for another day. The immediate concern was ensuring no new wave of hostilities erupted. In the aftermath, Reptar and Sor joined him on the viewing platform that faced the planet. The chamber was quiet aside from the soft hum of life support. Below them, Earth spun in its timeless rhythm, clouds shifting over the oceans, sunlight glinting off its seas. The emotional weight of what had transpired hung in the air. Reptar's voice was hushed. I used to think any species not unified was hopelessly vulnerable. These humans that didn't kneel. They showed us that their ability to create terrifying weapons, ironically, gave them an incentive to band together. Sor nodded, leaning against the metal railing. We should consider ourselves fortunate they didn't develop a taste for conquest before we arrived. They seemed singularly focused on protecting their home, not on expansion or subjugation. Vadar folded his arms, antennae drooping slightly. We must rethink so many assumptions. The Council's entire doctrine revolves around the inevitability of single government species. But the humans' approach has proven successful in its own strange way. Perhaps others exist like them, scattered in the galaxy, equally paradoxical. Reptar let out a long, rasping sigh. I never believed I'd see the day we left a planet behind without forcing it into compliance. Yet here we are. If we return to Council space with the story of how we were repelled, they'll reel in disbelief. But we have no other choice. They watched the planet rotate. The electronic readouts indicated the humans were standing by, making sure the Council honored the accord. Indeed, Earth had shown no further aggression. Vadar's gaze lingered on the swirl of storm systems drifting across an ocean. He tried to imagine how societies so distinct could come together in an instant to coordinate the planet's defense. Perhaps they had been practicing this balancing act for centuries, aware that any misstep would destroy them all. The War Council, ironically, had grown complacent in its own form of unification, confident that no challenge could arise from a fractured world. A silent moment passed before Sor's voice broke the stillness. We came here believing they would beg for mercy at the sight of our armada. Instead, they forced us into a negotiation from a position of weakness. We learned that they're not weak. They're simply complicated. Vadar turned and walked away from the observation window, each step echoing on the metal deck. Maybe that complication is their greatest strength. The Council wrote them off as a chaotic civilization, but that chaos hides a capacity for cooperation that might rival anything we've seen before. He paused at the exit, looking back one last time at the distant Earth. Even after the cataclysmic battle in orbit, the planet still shone with unbroken splendor. The humans, fractured as they were, had found a way to protect themselves from what they perceived as tyranny. Now, with the conflict simmering into an uneasy peace, the War Council's battered ships drifted at a respectful distance, warily acknowledging the unstoppable synergy that had materialized beneath Earth's patchwork of flags. As Vadar left the chamber, he thought about what might happen next, whether this forced acceptance of Earth's distinctive governance would truly hold, whether the Council might eventually integrate these humans in a more formal way, whether the humans, with their baffling mixture of synergy and strife, might teach the Council that unity can take forms other than a single banner. For the first time in his life, Vadar felt a spark of hope that the galaxy had room for more diverse political structures, even if it took an unthinkable battle to prove it. And so the War Council, bearing the scars of unexpected defeat, prepared to send word back to its far-flung domains. They would share the story of Earth, the day they found a planet that did not beg, did not break, but instead used its own brand of tenuous unity to repel an armada. Perhaps future council directives would caution that not all fractured worlds are powerless. Perhaps they would urge more nuanced approaches to first contact. In the aftermath of destruction and near calamity, a chance now existed for something new, a potential alliance anchored by mutual respect, an understanding that unity, in all its possible configurations, could stand stronger than anyone had ever believed. In the quiet that followed, Vadar felt the subtle hum of the warship's engines shift as it altered course, moving away from the planet's line of sight and into a safer orbit. He imagined the humans below, picking up the pieces, analyzing sensor data from the remains of advanced alien vessels. Their scientists would glean new insights. Their leaders would undoubtedly argue about the next steps. But in the final analysis, they had saved themselves from what they believed was an existential threat, and the cost of the council was staggering. Yet, ironically, the result might become the foundation of a relationship that neither side had predicted. A relationship that was neither one of conquest nor subjugation, but of uneasy respect. Walking the dimly lit corridors, he sensed the subdued atmosphere among the crew. Where once there had been proud confidence, now there was a somber humility. Though the official logs might phrase it differently, everyone aboard knew they had lost the moment the humans' warheads had rained upon them. Only mutual restraint and a deeper potential for cooperation had prevented the fiasco from escalating to total annihilation on both sides. Reptar caught up to him, claws scraping lightly against the deck plates. "Vadar," he said, voice subdued, "I keep replaying the simulation of that first wave of missiles. We were sure we could deflect them. We believed our shields were impenetrable. We were so wrong." "Yes," Vadar replied simply. "We were." The reptilian lowered his gaze. "Do you think we have reason to fear them in the future? Once they perfect interstellar travel, might they not come to our homeworlds?" Vadar shook his head. "Perhaps, but from what we've seen, they have no desire to subjugate others. They only fight when forced by fear for their survival. They're prepared to unify in crisis, yet they have no overarching desire to expand aggressively. At least, that is the impression they give." Reptar exhaled, perhaps relieved. "We'll have decades, maybe centuries, before they can challenge the Council's domains if they even want to. By then, hopefully, we'll have forged something resembling trust." He paused. "We can't treat them like we treated every other planet. They've proven that conclusively." Vadar nodded and continued walking. As he passed each corridor, the lights flickered from residual damage to the ship's power grid. They would have to patch those soon, perhaps with the help of the humans. Ironically, if the humans were willing to trade repairs for knowledge. Vadar wondered whether that might be the first exchange of mutual benefit, letting them see some advanced technology in return for raw materials or assistance. Stranger things had happened, and indeed, the entire situation was a testament to the unpredictability of the cosmos. Entering a small observation lounge, Vadar took a final glance through a narrow viewport. Earth was just a sphere of swirling blues and whites, shining in the sunlight. It looked almost serene, as if nothing momentous had happened. Yet everything had changed for both humanity and the War Council. They had proven that sometimes a fractured planet could stand against a galactic superpower, and the War Council had discovered that it could neither rely on old playbooks nor assume that unified command was the only viable path to stability. In the days and weeks to come, formal treaties would be refined. Earth's Crisis Council and the War Council's delegation would exchange ambassadors, or the equivalent. Some humans would press to learn from alien science, while some council members would be curious to explore Earth's cultural complexities firsthand. Perhaps heated debates would erupt among Earth's nations about the extent of cooperation with these aliens who had nearly attacked them. Perhaps the War Council's deeper leadership would question the entire approach of forcibly unifying other species from now on. But for the moment, this fragile ceasefire held. It was the best outcome in a situation that had begun with a near-certain annihilation. In the hush, as the warship stabilized its orbit, Vadar closed his eyes. He pictured the horizon of Earth from the vantage of a person standing on the surface, looking up at the sky. They would know that something had come, threatened them, and been driven back. That knowledge, in time, might unify them more than any Earthborn ideology ever had. Or it could splinter them again if old rivalries flared. One thing was certain. The future would not follow the neat lines the Council had predicted. He opened his eyes to see Reptar and Sor standing behind him. Neither spoke. They all stared at Earth through that narrow window, letting the magnitude of the moment sink in. They had come expecting pleas for mercy. Instead, they found a defiance forged by centuries of fractious cohabitation. That defiance had already restructured the War Council's approach in ways that might ripple across the entire galaxy. Perhaps humans were the final puzzle piece in a cosmic tapestry, a species whose contradictory nature could challenge every assumption. Finally, Vadar managed a small, wry smile, though tinged with sadness for those lost in battle. The War Council thought humans would beg for mercy, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Now I know better, and perhaps that's good for all of us. He turned away from the viewport and began walking down the corridor, heading for the negotiation center. There was still much work to do, many details to finalize, and a new era to explore. Behind him, Reptar and Sor followed, their footsteps echoing. In the quiet hum of the warship, the faint spark of possibility lingered. The galaxy, once so certain, now felt vast and unpredictable. If these fractious humans could unify long enough to chase away an entire armada, then anything was possible. It was both terrifying and strangely hopeful, a glimpse into a future in which unity did not mean uniformity and strength did not mean tyranny. And so the final chapter of conquest turned into the first chapter of coexistence. Only time would tell whether it would blossom into a stable partnership or devolve once more into hostility. For now, the Council had learned a lesson. Humans could not be forced to their knees. They had to be met halfway, on a path bridging the distance between 1,000 flags on one planet and the countless star systems of the War Council. That path, uncertain and challenging, began with a single step, acknowledging that Earth would not beg for mercy, and that the cosmos might be richer for it.